started. We have a full night of questions. Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Messages. If you are joining us and you have a question, just make sure you put it to all panelists. Sometimes we end up doing it internally, and so we don't always know that our question's not being put in there in the chat. Okay, so we're going to get started. My name is Stephanie Roberts. I'm just really excited to have everyone join us tonight. This is our fifth mental health panel, and our topic for tonight is about anxiety and depression. Dr. Clark may be joining us, so if he does, I will stop and have him start. We are really excited to have you here tonight. This has been a topic that we've had multiple questions from the beginning of when we started the panel, and we've been kind of recording those questions. We've been talking about how we can address this important issue, and we've pulled together an amazing group of panelists tonight. Before I get started, we want to let you know what to expect. So if you need translation services, at the bottom of the screen, you should see translation services. You just need to click join. So if you see that at the bottom and you need translation services, please make sure you do that. Rossi is our team panelist with us, and she's with us every session, and we're really excited to help have her join us. So just to let us know who's with us in the Zoom live tonight, we'd love you just to put in the chat, are you a student? Are you a parent? Are you a staff member, community member? This helps the panelists kind of get a sense of who's in the Zoom with us. We're really excited to kind of share our thoughts. We're also really excited. We have a group of mental health professionals and a parent with us. So I would like to just also let you know that my role in the district is Director of Partnerships and MTSS, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. My name is Stephanie Roberts, and I'm always available to answer any questions relating to the panels after they've been done. But we also have an amazing team tonight with us. My co-partner in crime, Felicia, is going to introduce herself as our co-facilitator, and then we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. Felicia?
Good evening and welcome. I'm Felicia Stuckey-Smith, Director of Student Services, and it's a pleasure to co-host with the wonderful Stephanie Roberts.
All right, thank you. We're going to have our panelists start with their introductions.
All right. My name is Missy Gilbarg. I'm a behavior health specialist too at Glenbrook Academy.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Keith. I'm a school psychologist. I'm at two elementary schools, Delta View and Ignacio Valley Elementary.
Hello, my name is Leslie Amar Harris, and I'm the counselor at Riverview Middle School.
Hi, I'm Shauna Puma, school counselor at Mount Diablo High School.
I'm S.J. Robinette. I'm a school counselor at Valley View Middle School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Bly, and I'm a counselor at Northgate High School.
Hi, and I'm Lena, and I am a mom of two college students and a high school student. Good to be
Great. Here. Thank you for joining us, panelists. We if this is the first time you have joined us for one of these panels, the way we facilitate this evening is we have about 6 questions that we've crafted prior to this evening, and a few of the panelists will respond to each one. We will be monitoring the chat. So if there are questions that people have that are on with us live, you can type those or comments in the chat, and Felicia Stuckey-Smith will be watching that to see if we need to see if we can respond to any of those. We'll go through these 5 questions, and then we'll finish it up. Our goal is to be done around 6:15. I have to be honest, sometimes we do go till 6:30, but for sure by 6:15, 6:30. And just to draw your attention, we have the 4 previous recordings of our webinars on the district website under student services, under mental health webinars. We also have 3 additional webinars coming through the remainder of the school year. On May 11th, we have parents of teens and tweens and how to facilitate independence when they can't leave the house. They are able to leave the house a little bit more than they were earlier in the year, but we still, have a little challenge with that. Then on June 1st, we're going to target a little bit more of a conversation around parents of elementary age students and what skills can we increase during distance learning and hybrid learning. And then lastly, at the end of June, June 22nd, how to find community supports and summer activities that are supporting that social emotional health. All right, so we encourage all of you to join us for the future ones, and sit back, relax, and let us know if you have any thoughts and questions for tonight. So our first question is going to go to Kimberly, Missy, and Lena. And the question is for the three of you: what does anxiety and depression look like in children and in adolescents? Kimberly?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand that anxiety can manifest in many different forms. It can affect them emotionally, socially, physically, as well as their sleep and school performance. So in terms of emotional changes, we may see a student feeling on edge or generally just irritable, may have difficulty concentrating. That's a real common one, or a sense of restlessness, maybe some unexplained outbursts or tantrums that seem to be out of the norm. Social changes, we may see avoiding social interactions with usual friends, maybe wanting to isolate from peers a bit more, or avoiding extracurricular activities. They're, typical sports or things that they're typically a part of. They may want to pull back and not necessarily want to be doing those things. And maybe spending an increased amount of time alone. So those are some big ones to look out for. In terms of physical changes, a lot of times we see a lot of somatic symptoms. So frequent headaches, stomach aches, maybe gastrointestinal problems. I know a lot of times I'll see kiddos heading to the office complaining a lot of these bodily aches and pains that can't necessarily be, medically explained. And they're unable to really voice what's behind it. But our feelings, as we all know, can manifest inside our body and be demonstrated in some of these ways. We can also see unexplained aches and pains in our joints and our bones, rapid heartbeat, sweating or trembling, maybe dizziness, difficulty breathing, chest pain, or we could see excessive fatigue. So we have maybe a tendency to get really hyped up and amped up, or just overly tired. Also, maybe a change in eating habits. In terms of sleep disturbances, it can definitely affect sleep. We may see difficulty, falling asleep, because that cyclical thinking and thought process can really make it difficult to stop, shut the brain off, and fall asleep. Then we may see the difficulty staying asleep. That can look like just waking up frequently, calling out maybe frequent nightmares, and just really not feeling refreshed after sleep in general. Finally, school performance. So, really anxiety can affect everything. So we may see a significant drop in grades, maybe some missed assignments, or just more forgetfulness, forgetting to turn things in, keeping track of everything. The kiddos may describe feeling overwhelmed, maybe procrastinating or avoiding school in general, putting those tasks off or assignments off, just a general feeling of feeling overwhelmed by things that maybe they typically weren't overwhelmed by. And as I said, difficulty concentrating on assignments more than usual. And we also have a link below for additional resources for anxiety and depression too.
Hi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the symptoms of depression. And I just want to start by saying it can be difficult sometimes to tell the difference between the ups and downs that are just part of being a child or an adolescent and the symptoms of depression. So many symptoms can easily be mistaken for normal childhood and teen development. Because of this, it's important that we really pay attention to your child's moods, their attitudes, their tolerance levels, their sleep and appetite patterns, and the things that they enjoy doing. If you pay attention now before there is a concern, it'll help you notice changes that aren't normal for your child or not part of a typical childhood or adolescent development. Some of the signs that we look for, and many are similar to anxiety, overwhelming feelings of sadness, which can include frequent crying spells for no reason, frequent thoughts and or talk of death, dying, or suicide, frustrations or feelings of anger, even over small matters. And this can this can come about in verbal and physical aggression if it's really extreme. Feeling hopeless or empty, a loss of interest in hanging out with family and friends. Low self-esteem is also another symptom. There's some changes in social behavior that you want to pay attention to. So sometimes, we talked about loss of interest in hanging out with friends, but on the flip side of that is wanting to spend more time with parents or guardians or family members, and like really always wanting to be by your side and not wanting to let you out of their sight. That's really important to pay attention to those changes. Avoiding extracurricular activities, spending increased time alone. Again, I want just to remind you, some of these things are developmentally appropriate. So you really want to start paying attention to your child's habits and patterns. Just like with anxiety, changes in school performance can be a sign. So significant drop in grades, missed assignments, procrastination, difficulty concentrating in class, skipping classes or entire school days for older kids or even younger kids, behavioral concerns in school. And then some physical symptoms you want to pay attention for: unexplained weight loss or weight gain, changes in appetite. Is your child eating a lot more or a lot less than usual? Similar to anxiety, frequent stomach aches and headaches, complaints of body aches, feeling ill with no medical explanation, and then sleep, increased fatigue, so being tired all the time, along with frequent or recurring insomnia. So always being tired, but also never being able to fall asleep at night, or waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep. And then difficulty waking up in the morning after getting a full night's sleep, just again, wanting to stay asleep. So I just want to reiterate, it's important to learn your child's typical patterns and behaviors so that you can help yourself identify if or when you should be concerned with what behaviors they're exhibiting.
Great, thank you. Lena?
So, yeah, as I'm listening to all of the symptoms, it just sounds like all three of my children. And I can, as Missy was saying, I think it can be very easy to identify, not really be able to identify this, because it is very common for children and for students and adolescents to also experience this as well. I could say that for all three of my kids. But one thing I think from a personal perspective that really now thinking back, my daughter is now in high school, but what she has been anxiety even before I could identify it, because I did, like many parents, we're not educated in mental health, and this is something that's very new, and I think it came out during the pandemic, even more so. But thinking back, I was thinking, even in second grade, there were certain things that where she expressed anxiety that was a little more than just a common child, like that was common. One example was having separation anxiety at a very young age, but it was more so than a typical child. She cried longer. It was for longer periods of time. There was also a time in second grade where she's very outgoing. So most people would never assume that she experienced this, but she would say in the middle of second grade that she was nervous. And I remember thinking back now, I realized that was anxiety. And another thing that she also experienced was having night terrors often. And so during that time, I think for me as a parent, learning a lot more about depression and anxiety now, I realized for me, I just thought that was a very common thing. And now I know, like, those are some things that we need to be a little more vigilant about, because it's a little bit more than the common like just actions of children and adolescents and even younger children.
Right. And Lena, like you're sharing, having the conversations from when they were younger, as they get older, if you don't keep that ongoing dialogue when they're younger, it's a lot harder to have the dialogue when your child is struggling with anxiety or depression. And I think this understanding, like you said, something that's outside of just the normal behavior that you're experiencing from your child. One thing I do want to draw attention to those that are listening is, in March, we did a very comprehensive panel around when to look for help beyond the home. And so if you're hearing and we're speaking to you as a student or a parent or a community member, and you're like, wow, I'm getting a little worried. This sounds a lot like my situation. As you're listening to tonight, there is an additional resource in our March panel that I do recommend people kind of hopping over there. If this is really speaking true to you and you're like, oh my gosh, what next? I think I need to learn a little bit more, and what resources are available, and what could I do, and what are resources available to me and my family if I needed to get additional support. That it's just not situational. It's just like, oh, my child's going through anxiety for the month of April. This seems to have been the last year. And as Alina has shared, more families and students and young people have been feeling these things because of the current situation. So, it's not unnatural or normal to be feeling this, but then trying to catch it early so that you can help connect them to resources and coping strategies and skills and additional resources. And, and sometimes that's, working with the doctor, but, connecting your child or yourselves with resources. So awesome. Thank you for responding to that question, number one. Felicia, are there anything in the chat that is specific to this particular question before I check to see if the panel wants to add anything to this question? Oh, you're on mute.
One of the questions that's coming up as it relates to a younger child and needing to seek professional help, when is that necessary, one? And also, how can parents reinforce that counseling is not a bad thing?
Yeah. If there is somebody on the panel that would like to respond to that, I highly recommend that individual to go watch the March panel recording. We speak specifically about that and provide a variety of resources of where you can go, who you can connect to. And then these resources are also available on the district website, not only under the student services webpage and the mental health, but also under the parent portal, where we really try to put accessible resources that are available, and we keep updating them each time. So for the panel, is there anybody on the panel that would like to respond to that and or had anything to add specifically to this one question?
I did put it in the chat, but we do have that question at a later question. So we are going to answer when to seek professional help, and that also includes looking back into that March panel as well. But we will get to it.
Great, thank you, Leslie.
And I would like to add that if you haven't already, for those wondering at what point, but of course we'll get into that. But also, if you haven't already reached out, to your principal to notify your school psychologist or your school counselor, definitely do that, because we're able to hook you up with additional resources, if not the ones that will be included here.
And Lena, I saw you unmute. Did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, definitely. Like for me, I think just from personal experience and as a parent, I think one of the things that and I'm just sharing this as a parent that has made a lot of mistakes. One thing that I think I would have done differently, especially since my kids were older, is actually normalizing seeking help. I think as parents, a lot of us don't even think about seeking that help. And thinking back to even my child and the experiences that she had as a little girl, I think just as parents, sometimes we have this attitude of just like buckle down and get through it kind of mentality. And I think that's one thing that we just need to check ourselves on.
I 100% agree, Lena. I had that same situation with one of my children, and I'm like, you're fine. And then realizing when it got to that point, we're like, oh gosh, she's not fine.
Yeah.
And gosh, how did I miss that? I mean, I'm a mental health, I've been trained in this. So, really kind of trusting and when they're saying it, kind of just keep that conversation. So I think that's really important to share.
Can I add one thing, Stephanie? I also think in part of normalizing the conversation, you want to not only focus on like the ways the counselor, can help you sort of fix what's not working, but highlight some of the things that are going well in your child's life. And the counselor can help you have more of those really good days and help you, accomplish more things that are going well. So it's not all about, just fixing what's broken, but it's like improving or expanding upon what's really working and just kind of like changing that conversation too. And also as a parent, And, the resources aren't always available, but, modeling. So I want you to see a therapist, but it's also something I can do, because again, it's not just about fixing what's broken, but it's sort of like, we go to the doctor for our physical health, and the same thing for our mental health. We can check in with mental health specialists just to kind of like, get a checkup or whatever. I know it's not that easy, but just having those conversations about like the ways that it can be beneficial.
And we did put a link into the chat where the parent portal, but if you go onto the district website and you see parents, you'll click down and you'll see something that just says parent portal. If you go to the parent portal to the right-hand side, there's a variety of resources for teaching, but also for counseling services. And on there, you will be able to at least find a name of a contact, whether it's a school counselor who's on site or providing support to your school, and a phone number that you can contact. You can contact a school counselor, you can contact your teacher, somebody on a school campus that you feel you have that relationship with, and they can help connect you to resources that we have within the district, and then also making some recommendations that are available within our community. So with that, I'm going to transition to question number 2, and this is going to go to Kimberly, Keith, and Robinette. What is the relationship between sleep and anxiety and depression?
Okay, so, I would say for those, sounds like a lot of parents are already saying, hey, all of this is describing my child. This is already going on. For those that aren't quite, realizing it or noticing it, it is really important to know, how anxiety is frequently connected to sleeping problems. I've seen this a lot in my 2-year-old, and I'm already starting to think, oh gosh, this is what's going on. But because excessive worry and fear can really make it harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep throughout the night. So it can look like that difficulty in falling asleep, maybe more so for the little ones wanting you to stick around a lot more and please stay here until I fall asleep, or, fears and whatnot of, needing the light on. A lot of that's common, but kind of it's taken a little bit further to a point where you're like, okay, this seems to be more of a concern. For the older ones, maybe just tossing and turning and feeling really restless. It can also look like, unsatisfying sleep, as I mentioned earlier, just sleep disturbances in general. So I would say that, and the nightmares and whatnot. So I would say, one thing that I think is really, really helpful is to help them to first notice that they're even in that cyclical thinking, that spiral, that thinking that just goes round and around and around. That's hard to do. It takes a lot of practice. We as adults probably don't even realize we're doing that. And we're like, why am I not asleep? Oh, because I've just been going on and on and on about, who knows what. So helping them to notice, hey, you're doing that your brain's doing that, maybe separating it from the actual child. You're not anxious, but you're dealing with anxiety. So helping them to notice it and then stop themselves, turn on the light, have a piece of paper or a notepad. It doesn't have to be any special journal or anything, but just have something right there on the nightstand and write it down. Whatever it is, make a list, little from I'm worried about my test tomorrow, or I've got a zit on my chin, whatever it is in the elementary or the teenage mind. Get it down on a piece of paper. So there it is. This is what I'm thinking about. It's right here. It's written down. I can worry about it tomorrow, but right now I need to go to sleep. Also thinking of maybe changing the behavior. So just getting up and walking around for a minute. Get up, come out, have a sip of water. I know we don't want to encourage that in the little kids a lot, but it's like, get back in bed. That seems to be the excuse for not going to sleep. But I think there's a degree where we could be like, okay, we just need to stop this behavior of the, cyclical thinking, get up, move around for a second, and just the act of changing our position and changing what it is that we're doing can really help us just lying there and thinking about it over and over again. So I would really, you don't even have to call it journaling, but just getting it written down sometimes just gives the mind that option to just, let it go for a second.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robinette? Oh, you're on mute, Robinette.
So with the relationship between sleep and depression, we've talked a little bit about how people who are depressed and have been feeling those symptoms that we talked about for 2 weeks or more, sometimes they will have trouble either falling asleep, staying asleep, or they sleep a lot. They seem like they're always tired and the sleep doesn't doesn't seem to rejuvenate them. And I also wanted to talk about how not getting enough sleep can make people, especially teens and youths and kids, they can make them vulnerable to anxiety and depression. And so one of the things that's going on in your body when you're sleeping is you have these cycles of sleep that rejuvenate the body and help it to grow. And it takes many of these sort of 45-minute sleep cycles, about 8 of them when they're young and they're still growing, which is about 9 hours of sleep to just grow and rejuvenate the body. And then the next hour and a half, 2 45-minute cycles, the brain spends on rejuvenating, or the body spends on rejuvenating the brain. And then that's where you get the benefits from the sleep that help you to focus, that help you to have a positive attitude, that helps you concentrate, that gives you kind of that emotional resiliency. And so if particularly our 12-year-olds and our 9-year-olds, our 10-year-olds, if they're only getting 8 hours of sleep, their bodies aren't quite getting enough and their brains really aren't getting enough sleep. And that can trigger, if that goes on and on and on, that can be a cause of depression, and that can be a cause of anxiety, because they're much more emotionally fragile and they can't handle difficult situations and challenges if they don't have enough sleep. And so one of the protective factors against depression and anxiety is that quality sleep, and having a schedule where the student is getting all of the sleep that they need. And even teenagers need more than 9 hours of sleep in order to get that brain rested. And then as adults, we're not growing, and so we don't need as many of those body sleeps, and so we need less sleep because we can get those last hour and a half of sleep that rejuvenates the brain. We can those start sooner. And so some ideas for just in general, some good sleep hygiene ideas is to have a regular sleep schedule and not go to bed 2 or 3 hours later on the weekends, but just maybe 45 minutes to 1 hour later on the weekend. So you're really having a regular bedtime, making sure that your area is comfortable, that you turn off the screens about an hour, no more screens about an hour before you want to be, I'll say it, want to be unconscious, or would they want to be asleep. And then having a nightly routine. So you do everything in the same order, and that can also help your body kind of know, hey, it is time to relax. It is time to go to sleep. It's time to, shift my brain waves so that I can fall asleep and have really, really quality sleep that's protective against some of this emotional fragility that we see in depression and anxiety.
Perfect.
And I would add, for looking at the chat, for those kiddos with dealing with ADHD, it's especially important, that we highlight that both, parents and students really create that environment that is conducive for sleep, and just really emphasizing the electronics. I can't even emphasize enough how much the blue lights just really mess up our sleep cycles and that production of melatonin in general. Speaking of melatonin, sometimes parents want to have found help in looking in over-the-counter melatonin to really just help relax the body and help the individual to fall asleep. But like she was saying, I get those electronics turned off at least 30 minutes, an hour before bed. No TV an hour before bed. It's so easy for us to just kind of get stuck in that cycle of having it on, and I forget too. But one thing that's also helpful is just kind of get those lights around the house turned down too. It really helps tell our body that, okay, it's getting time. I think a soft white noise or a fan is so helpful too. It's something that just kind of takes us back to being in the womb, essentially. If the kiddos need a nightlight, that's fine, a soft kind of amber colored one, but really the environment is really going to help out.
Okay, great, thank you. Felicia, looking at the chat, is there any questions that are coming specific for this question, or anything we could respond to before moving to question 3? You're mute.
We can keep going.
Okay.
Because some of the questions probably will be addressed a little later.
Right, perfect. All right, so we're going to move to question 3, and Robinette's going to connect us with what is going on with the brain during anxiety and depression.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and talk about anxiety first, What's going on in the brain in anxiety is that there is a normal process that is supposed to protect us from danger. And what happens when somebody has high anxiety or kind of chronic anxiety is that process gets activated too often for things that aren't life-threatening. And it starts to basically take control, you may notice, of your student or your kid, and it may even start taking control of the family. And so what's happened is that when the brain gets a signal that says, hey, we are in danger, it responds by shooting a bunch of adrenaline throughout the body, and it puts the body in what's called the fight, flight, freeze response. And it prepares you to meet the challenge of a life-threatening situation. We don't actually have too many of those in our modern day and age, but our brains still go there. Public speaking can trigger it. Somebody saying, we're having a math test right now, sometimes can trigger it for some people. And we react, and our kids react as though it's a life-threatening kind of situation. And so when this adrenaline starts shooting through the body, it's not putting your kids into a zone like, you know, you have your cup of coffee in the morning and you're much more able to function and you can think clearly and focus and get a lot done. It's above and beyond that, and it puts it into this particular alarm mode that takes over, and it takes kind of your rational thinking offline, and it sends the blood out to the muscles so they can run or fight or stand there motionless for as long as you need to while the danger passes. And so it is kind of shutting down some of the systems in your body, like we don't need to digest food while we're in mortal danger. And so for some people, they get stomach aches. And for some people, everything comes out one end or it comes out the other end. And that happens. The muscles are activated. And so we talked about, you know, feeling shaky. And that's why there's so many physical responses in anxieties, because you've got this adrenaline high levels and it's really, really uncomfortable. Heart rate can go up, breathing can get short. And sometimes people feel like they're having a heart attack. The chest can hurt and it can be really scary and it's very uncomfortable. And so it's something to realize, but that is also affects thinking patterns. And so we've been talking about that cyclical thinking pattern. And that is what the brain is focusing on, one thing. What is the danger? And so it'll go round and around and around and only focus on the one thing that's danger. Even your eyes focus on the one thing. And so I don't know if you've ever like been in a panic and tried to find something, but if it's, you know, 6 inches from where you're looking, you can't see it because your focus is so tunnel vision. And that's kind of what's happening when students are having kind of major anxiety. The brain will also use its creativity instead of for facing a challenge and problem solving. It uses its creativity and imagination for coming up with what if worst case scenarios. And so everything is focused on survival. And so I'll invite you to just kind of understand that until that passes and your student is back into a more calm state of body, then you won't be able to reason with them. And so part of helping anxiety is getting into them more comfortable. And then part of it is also learning to challenge that little voice that says you're gonna die or you're in danger. And so that it doesn't start taking over more and more and more often. And so avoiding makes you more comfortable, but avoiding can also make you jump to alarm sooner when you get near anything that has making you uncomfortable. So it's a tricky thing with anxiety, but it's a natural process that is kind of gone overboard and is taking over. With depression, what's going on is that the chemicals in your brain that allow you to experience and to pass on and amplify pleasant thoughts or pleasant experiences, that chemical has gotten to a low enough level in the brain. It's so low that it kind of peters out before the individual can actually experience the good things. And so you can't experience satisfaction at a job well done or pride at, you know, getting something, you know, overcoming a tough challenge. You don't experience that. You have a great meal, you got nothing. You bite into an apple, you don't go, it peters out before you get there. It's hard to feel relief, and then it's hard to feel pleasure at the things that you used to feel feel good about. If there's enough good things coming in often enough, then you can kind of overcome the fact that there's low levels of those chemicals, and you can actually start having some good thoughts. And so that's encouraging. But in general, the levels are so low that unless you've got a lot of good stuff coming your way, you're not going to get those good feelings. And that makes sense why with depression, there's low enjoyment of previous activities. It's hard to find a sense of hope. And students can be really unmotivated because it doesn't feel good to get stuff done where it used to. And that thought of why bother can come in. The other thing to notice is that the negative pathways, the ability to have negative thoughts, those are run by a different chemical. And so the student has, or your kid has the ability to think of all the bad things possible. And it's really hard to think of the good things. And it's really not fun to be inside that kind of a brain. So that's kind of what's going on. And something that naturally keeps those chemicals up and at good levels in our lives is exercise and positive social interactions, as well as quality of sleep and getting those last hour and a half of sleep. So we're talking, 10 to 11 hours of sleep for your kids, and at least 9.5 or so for your teenagers. But those things, especially the exercise and the social activities, those things are what all of a sudden our teens and our youth and our kids were cut off from, a lot of them, when COVID started. And I think that is one of the reasons why depression is kind of running rampant right now. And so it's something for us to keep in mind.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Robinette. A lot of comments in the chat saying they haven't been able to see or hear such a great explanation of how it's affecting our bodies and our minds. So thank you for that. I think our next 3 questions are really going to give more of, okay, well, what do we do now? So now we're concerned. And so before I move on to question 4 for the panel, is there anything that anybody wants to add to this particular question, or Felicia, if we need to address anything in the chat besides what I just shared? Looks like we're good. Okay, well then I'll keep us moving. Let's go to question 4. Leslie's going to start out, then Lena, Shauna, and then Kristen. And so this question for the group is, how can I help my child manage anxiety or depression? And what are some healthy habits my child can practice? Leslie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I think starting off with giving students the tools that they need when they are experiencing that kind of like anxious moment. A lot of our students have test anxiety, or they feel nervous about, just coming back onto campus. And so something that's like really common that can be used are different like relaxation techniques. So taking those slow, deep breaths. And then also you can also do progressive muscle relaxation. And these are some things that you can, teach your child or do it with your child when they're feeling anxious. And what I mean by progressive muscle relaxation is that you like tense any part of your body, like really like squeeze it and really like cause that tension, and then relax. And then kind of go through your entire like body, starting from the bottom straight up to the top. Other things can also be like mindfulness. I know some of our schools, well, Riverview actually has something called the Mindful Life Project, which talks a lot about like mindfulness. And you can download the Mindful Life Project or several of the other like different apps. If you have teens or adolescents, you can have them download those apps and kind of like go through it with them there. There's also a really good mindfulness technique of using your 5 senses. So 5 things that you can hear, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch or feel, 2 things that you smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. And again, that's kind of bringing it back to the body instead of thinking about this anxious thought or this depressive thought. Even you're putting yourself back into your body, into that actual moment in time. Another thing can also be like visualization. So think of something that makes you feel most relaxed, or imagine a place where you feel really happy, and that could be like a beach, that could be an area. And then you can also even have them, like imagine themselves in an anxious situation, and then flipping it and saying, imagine yourself being really confident in that situation, or really taking the reins on that anxious thought. The other thing that parents can do to kind of help out is to, again, remind them to practice, healthy habits, bedtime, eating healthy foods, making sure you have some sun or go outside, or, do some exercise of some sort. And then, just as a parent, taking a step back and acknowledging that, sometimes we don't understand what our child is going through, or, why they're so fearful or anything, but just taking that pause and taking that breath, so that you can, work as a team with your child against this anxious moment or this anxious feeling.
Lena?
Thank you, Leslie. That was really good. I learned a lot from listening to you. Um, I think, and then to add to that, again, from a more personal experience, for our family, what has really helped is really, as we mentioned before, like normalizing conversations, and even within our own family, destigmatizing it. I think without realizing, we tend to stigmatize mental health. That was one thing that I've learned, especially during this time when when the depression and anxiety got far worse. And so I think that's something that we're still working on, and I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is, I think Leslie brought this up a little bit about just having the conversation with the students as well. It's validating their feelings. I remember with my daughter, when she would talk to me about concerns or some certain issues, because we have a very open relationship in terms of just being able to converse about many things. One of the things I would say to her is, as a parent, I would say, oh my gosh, this is like such middle school issues or high school issues. Like, don't worry about it. You'll get over this. And what I realized was that was actually hurting them. And so hurting her. And so one thing that I have learned is to really validate her feelings when she's feeling a certain way. Another thing, I think this was a topic that I think was covered. I don't know if it was in March, but it was around suicide as well. When we talk about validating, I think being very open and willing to talk about suicide, I think has been really good for our family as well. And one thing that we've done as part of just destigmatizing it is we've started to really, I think it's very easy to, if we have a broken arm, we go and fix it, or we go to the doctor, but a lot of times we think that we can handle some of the mental health issues ourselves. I think that was the one thing that we realized. And so what we've done is we've started to not only destigmatize, but it's been a shift for me, but seeing it as a medical condition, seeing it as a medical health issue. And so once I remember recently, just the S word was so hard for me to even say with my kids. And one time I actually said, once I started understanding depression and anxiety a little bit more, I actually asked my daughter if she's had any suicide ideation. And I said it just like that, as a medical terminology. And she was really surprised, but she was also really relieved. I mean, it was amazing to see that relief in her eyes, to be able to talk about it without thinking she was going to be judged or criticized or have any kind of stigma around that conversation. So it was that part was really good. Let's see what else. I think the other thing was, I think there was a question someone asked, is it appropriate to tell teachers in terms of just as parents how to I think it's important how to discuss this. I think it's important to also advocate for your child. Again, I can't stress enough how little there is known about mental health. And so even amongst teachers, I think there's a lot of different levels of learning. And I do remember in middle school, one of the teachers thinking, because my child was very outgoing, thinking that her not doing homework and not finishing assignments, and she's also a very good student in terms of she was an A and B student, and so not doing her homework was actually in defiance. But what I had to explain was that she was depressed during that time. And so these are the kinds of things I think that it's very important to ensure that the teachers as well as the school counselors all are aware of this. I mean, it may be at different degrees, but just that knowledge is going to help your child so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lena. So important from your perspective, and I 100% agree. It's probably it's so scary for us to have those really serious conversations around self-harm and suicide, but it's so important. If you don't know how to have it or you don't feel comfortable, you want to reach out and ask for help, because it is really important when they're in that point. And we do talk really specifically about conversations and what you do in the March video. So if this is ringing true to you, please go back and take a look at a watch of that video. All right, so thank you, Lena. Shauna, do you want to continue on?
Yes. So I can't stress enough how vital it is to exercise. Not only is it good for our biological health, but it's excellent for our mental health. It increases dopamine in the brain. It increases the endorphins, and those are all the good feelings. And so I don't know if you notice, but when you do your own kind of exercise, how are you feeling after? Usually you're feeling better than what you're feeling prior. So it's figuring out what kind of exercise will our kids do. I have a huge challenge with my children in this area. Some kids, they love sports, and then it makes it easy, right? They love soccer, baseball, football, but then there's the kids that aren't into that. There's dance and gymnastics, jiu-jitsu. Those are some of the popular ones, but not every kid's into, the contact stuff or being on show. They might be more the quiet natured kid. So what do kids like that want to do? We still have to exercise them. So it's going to be a lot of trial and error for some of these kids. And you might have to do it with them, like if it's going on a hiking trip, Mount Diablo has some great hiking, and Oakland Hills, there's a lot of areas. We have the water zones like Benicia, you can walk around the water. There's parks. Indoor rock climbing, that's something that we're going to be doing soon. Biking is great. We have so many trails around here, and we have gorgeous weather right now. Take advantage right now. But yeah, anything you can do as a family, just the goal is to get that heart rate going. And then after, ask them, how was that? Did you enjoy it, or you hated it? Because you want to keep trying to do something that's going to, get them to exercise. And the hope is they're going to start feeling a little bit better. It might, if they're at at 1 out of 10 and their anxiety and depression is really high, it might just take them down a couple notches. But I think no matter who you are, it's going to take you down some notches. So it's imperative. The other thing that's super important is having conversations on a weekly basis, checking in. And it doesn't have to be, super in depth and, emotional, but just, so you ask, how are you doing? And they say, oh, I'm good. So we have to figure out how we can engage them more. And, some tricks I use is, how is your friend so-and-so? How is she doing with, this or that? And I notice when they're talking more about other people, it's easier for them. And then sometimes it could come back to them, well, what did you think of that? So I have this conversation cards. You can get them on Amazon. And it's just things that you don't think of because, it's like, okay, what can I ask now? They're giving me a lot of fine and good. Like some examples, what would you love to study in the future? What do you most enjoy doing by yourself? And, so there's hundreds of these questions, and we just do a little round table, when we're sitting down, and I just keep the conversation cards on the table. So, we want to just keep that communication open. And, we've gone through a lot of science of what it looks like when they're feeling that way, but, they want support, and they want to be in a healthy home. And sometimes we are going to need outside resources to help with that. And we'll get into that.
Thank you. Kristen?
Okay, so I think one of the most important things you can do as a parent to help manage your child's anxiety and depression is communicate and listen to your child. Some kids have a hard time talking about their feelings, so this can make it really hard to cope when they're dealing with the anxiety and depression. So talking about feelings and starting that communication from an early age is so important. Asking your child how they feel and how something made them feel, naming the different emotions so that when they deal with some of the more intense emotions, it's normal for them to talk about it or seek help from you or a trusted person if they need it. With that, when your student is struggling, resist the urge to fix it. I know I have a really hard time with this as a school counselor and as a parent myself. My immediate instinct is try and find a solution. And I think Lena kind of touched on this too. It just validate their feelings. Most of the time, your child just needs to let it out with a trusted person and to somebody who's not going to judge them. Some other healthy habits your child can practice at home, and I think Kimberly mentioned this earlier, is journaling or writing down what they're experiencing or what they're feeling. This is especially good for children that have a hard time communicating or articulating their thoughts. They might feel more comfortable writing it down. And lastly, this might seem really straightforward, but creating a routine and a structure for your child at home is important and can have a major impact on their mental health. I know with the pandemic, many routines have gone out the window, but not having any sort of routine can actually make our anxiety worse. And everyone's routine is going to be slightly different, but it's important to remember even little things we do in our routine are important, like waking up and going to sleep around the same time. And we all heard how important sleep is, and getting enough sleep, getting dressed in the morning, brushing your teeth, having meals at the same time, having a planned time for exercise. Those are all really important little things we can do to help our students stay focused and maintain a good mental health.
Thank you. For the panel, is there any additional thoughts that are coming to your mind before I check with Felicia? Kimberly?
You know, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, it looks like a parent mentioned the Calm app. That is, I mean, gosh, what is the research saying about that and meditation? I mean, if I could only get into the habit of that, I know I would be better off too, but I think that's a really, really cool tool that it just teaches something that we all could use. It can be really helpful in the anxiety and depression. But, you know, I just want to emphasize, you know, what kind of has already been touched on to, you know, for Miss Benito, I think, asked something in the text, in the chat as well, is that I think the goal is I wouldn't expect that you're going to be able to prevent the anxiety from happening because, you know, everything affects everybody in different ways. I think that the goal is to, you know, to not eliminate it, but to help them manage it. So, you know, like others have said, really respecting the feelings and acknowledging them. But we really want to help, you know, them figure out, okay, what can we do about this, and separating the behavior or the anxiety and depression from the child. You are not anxious. You are not depressed. You are dealing with some anxiety and dealing with, you know, some depression, but also assigning a time to worry about it. You know, allowing them, okay, we can have a time to think about these things or feel, you know, a certain way about this, but then, you know, being able to say, okay, but I'm going to do that a little bit later, or here's the list of things I want to do, but right now I'm going to, you know, what I want to worry about, but right now I'm going to, you know, do this. Also, I would say at school, having somebody that you can go to for those that are feeling, you know, extra anxious while at school or depressed, having kind of, you know, a safety plan that you've put together with the principal, the school counselor, the psychologist, and identifying those key individuals and places where your kiddo can go during those moments of increased anxiety or depression can be really helpful.
Thank you, Kimberly. Felicia, anything in the chat that we should address? We did put a link to a very comprehensive parent resource that is available under the parent portal. In the chat, I put a link, but There are the Calm apps. I mean, it's a great piece that we have continued to add resources for the previous panels. And it's a little overwhelming, but it's a great go-to place to scroll through and see if there's anything that really speaks to what you're looking for. So I just wanted to draw your attention. And Felicia, anything else in the chat that we needed to address? And I see Lena has
Can
a
I just
thought
say
as
one
well.
Yeah.
thing to add on to what Kimberly was saying? I started implementing the find time to worry in and out in another during like schedule that time. And what I have found is by that time I forgot what I was supposed to worry about. So thank you for that advice. And the one other thing that I just wanted to add to this was that I forgot who mentioned it earlier, but about modeling the behavior. I know that when we talk about anxiety, like my kids have seen me anxious a lot, like working overtime or doing things and not going to bed myself on time. And so I think those are the things that I have learned to be much more cognizant about in terms of modeling that behavior for our children. And so I think so many times we're on our beds right before bed looking at our emails or looking at the phone or whatever. And so that's something that I think we're trying to do is to change the habit, not just for our teenagers, but for ourselves too.
That is huge. Not do as I say, not as I do, right? Yeah, that's a big one. And for those, I see, a parent who, what if we can't get our teenager to do it? That's really hard. There's going to be times where we have to watch them struggle and watch them go through it and just trust, and pray that there is that light at the end of the tunnel, but knowing this may be so difficult right now. And, I'm giving you the tools and the resources. I know these things are going to help. But it's going to be up to you when you decide you want to do it. Or can we just try it tonight and see what happens? Or give me 3 nights in a row and let's see what happens. What's different?
And for those who have young children, I mean, I think being able to do that right away is going to be so important, because I realized for my kids, it was so hard to break when they became teenagers. And if I did that in elementary or middle school and was really firm on that, I think that it would have been different for us too.
Thank you. Felicia, yes, Leslie and then Felicia. I just want to make sure we're getting the chat questions as well. Leslie?
Oh, I was gonna, well, so one of the questions was what should we do if our child gets too comfortable with using their resources at school? I think starting off is, backtracking a little bit, the normalized counseling with your child, I think you can address it as like, it's just somebody that you can talk to, like they keep things confidential. They don't really tell anybody unless, you're gonna get hurt or something. That can kind of be that initiating or that open door for the student to reach out to a counselor or a school psychologist, or just like an adult that they trust. And then I think as far as like if your child gets too comfortable, I would say that like all mental health professionals and I think adults on campus try really hard to make sure that students can advocate for themselves and like one of the things is like teaching them those, like coping strategies and coping skills in order for them to like not have to need us. Like for me as a counselor, like I'm trying to provide students all the resources that they need so that they don't need me anymore. And so I think, like again, reiterating, all the coping strategies that and then all the things that, your counselor or your, school psychologist or whoever at school is helping your student, just reiterating those like different strategies will help the child kind of back away from like always going to the counselor, always going to, that teacher.
Great. Thank you, Leslie, for adding that. Felicia, was there anything that we didn't, because I think Leslie addressed kind of one of the questions.
Yeah, I think you've addressed it through the parent portal and resources, but there was a question regarding if there's a panel like this for teens.
I saw that chat and I made a note. We always encourage everyone to come, but I think you're right. I think having one that's specific for teens, knowing that it's just teens talking to teens, is a great suggestion, which is one of the benefits of having these panels. We always get additional new ideas. So thank you for that suggestion. And we haven't had one specific for students, but I definitely think it's something that is worth some conversation and planning. And we have found that when we've been able to bring our mental health staff, in addition to parents like Lena, and we've had panels with students that have joined. They have been so helpful and very collaborative. And I think each person who's on a panel speaks to somebody differently that's listening to us. And so I definitely, this is our 5th one, and I think they're getting better and better each time. So I can't promise, but I see a student panel in the future and having some students on the panel with our mental health providers, because I think that collaboration is really, really a powerful piece. So, all right, we've got 2 more questions and we're right on time approximately. So this next question is going to go to Missy and Leslie. At what point should I seek help for my child? And when do I need to seek help in school and or outside therapy, or a combination?
Okay. So it's important to know that depression and anxiety symptoms aren't just going to disappear on their own, right? So if they left untreated, they can get worse, and they can lead to other problems. So it's important to seek help early, and by seeking help early, you can increase the ability to reduce symptoms and decrease the risk of more severe symptoms from happening. And by starting to seek help, you can start out by utilizing some of the strategies that were mentioned earlier in the presentation, some of the resources that have been shared, and just keep track of how long you've been using those strategies. Have you noticed a difference when you're using them? Have you used them consistently? Did you notice a difference then? Or has your child used them? Did you notice a difference then? And if the symptoms don't get better or they're worse after a couple of weeks, then it's probably time to reach out to your child's pediatrician or school staff. If you can reach out to your school counselor, behavior health specialist, teacher, administrator. If they're not the right person, they will connect you with the right person to support you in whatever you and your child's needs are. Another great thing to do is just talk to your child. We're talking about communication, right? So just ask them. They may or may not say they need help, because we were talking about the stigma and kids' reluctance to talk to us, but you might be surprised. And if they say they need help, don't wait. That's the time to reach out to, if they're letting you know right away. There are also times when you shouldn't wait, and you should just seek help immediately, such as if your child is frequently talking about death and dying or suicide, if they have increased risk-taking, self-destructive behavior or self-harm, social isolation, they're just sort of cutting themselves off from everybody and not even communicating with you to allow you to try some of these things or to see how they're doing, physical aggression towards themselves, others, or property, people, animals, anything that results in hurting someone or something, you should seek immediate help for. And these are suggestions. You should listen to your gut. If you feel like none of those major things have happened, but you feel like it's something you need to get help for, then follow what you feel is the right thing to do for your child. But definitely try some of the things to start with, some of the strategies that we've discussed here today. You'd be surprised how big of an impact those things can have on your child's well-being, and your well-being is, and just so start there. It's a great place to start, and then kind of like see where things go from there. And if you're getting calls from school that there are behavior issues, or if you notice your child's grades are slipping, or they're refusing to go to school or skipping school, then you definitely want to reach out to the school right away. And that's when you would start, that you would want to get help in the school versus just finding help on the outside.
Yeah, everything what Missy said. And then I think, in addition to that, like, if the anxiety and the depression is really interfering with like that daily life of the student, like they're consistently, not sleeping on time, they are refusing to go to school or getting up for school, or they feel really like, they feel a sense of like distress, either before an activity or during an activity. Like, for example, like if sports was really like fun for them, and then all of a sudden there's that immediate change of they don't like to do it or want to do it anymore. That's kind of like a red flag as well. And then the other things to kind of look for is like, spending too much time on homework, or feeling overworked or really, really, really stressed out. And then, again, like the March panel really talked about like seeking professional help. And so, we're going to suggest to kind of take a look at that as well, for more information on that.
For the panel, is there any additional thoughts specific to this question? And then we'll check in with Felicia on the panel. Yes, Robinette, you're on mute. There you go.
So I would also say, like with the depression, if you're noticing, the symptoms that we had talked about with depression, if you're noticing those in your student or your kid, kind of most of days for, most of the time, most of the days for 2 weeks or more, then it's really time to go talk to a doctor. If their anxiety is making them so they can't come to school or they won't come to school, and that's happened 2 days, it's time to go check and it's time to get help, because with anxiety, a lot of times avoiding decreases that anxiety, but it makes their world really small. And so it's time to start that treatment plan that includes more than just how do we get them more comfortable, which a lot of the things are about, but also how do we get them so their world doesn't keep shrinking, and how do we get them back doing and engaging in life in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Robinette. Okay. Felicia, is there anything in the chat that we should respond to or at least take note of?
Well, the great thing is our panelists are responding as we go.
Good. You guys are awesome.
There. But we do have one that says we need a list of strategies just like the characteristics of anxiety and depression.
Okay, so we can work to add an additional link. So most of the resources that we will link we'll go back to that mental health webinar page. So right above this recording, which will probably be on the district website maybe by Friday, we can try to put together a link that's specific to symptoms and strategies associating with anxiety and depression. So thank you, great suggestion. Yeah, and I also saw Leslie just made a link in the chat for those that are watching this on a recording. Under the parent portal, when you go to the parent portal to the far right-hand side, you'll go kind of scroll down and you'll see counseling services. The school counseling website that we have for the district is very, very comprehensive, and it is regularly being updated. So I would highly suggest that also being a great resource. A lot of it is overlapping. So, if you get on one, you're not having to go to 5 different places. We're trying to have the parent portal be that space where you as a parent can go to access resources at your fingertips. All right, so we're going to go with our last question of the evening, and this is going to go to Kristen and Shauna. What can I do as a parent or a guardian when I'm feeling anxious or depressed and I'm still trying to care for my child? Kristen?
So this is something I struggle with at times. I can't emphasize this enough. We have to take care of ourselves. If you're not caring for yourself, it will be harder for you to be there for your child. We discussed some self-care tips for your child earlier. That these can also be good for you. Exercise, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, just taking time for yourself and doing things that make you happy. I know I sometimes find myself waking up in the middle of the night and worrying about a million things, that cyclical thinking. So what I've started doing, and you can have a journal right by your bedside, but what I've done that's helpful is, Stephanie's raising her hand, is a couple hours before bed, writing down the things that I'm worried about, and then also writing down some things that I can do to help that worry. That really helps me from preventing like waking up at 3 in the morning and getting into that cyclical thinking. By doing these things for yourself, you're also modeling these self-care things for your child. So, and I think when we're open and honest with our children about our feelings and letting them know that at times we can feel overwhelmed, sad, or anxious, it will help to normalize the same feelings that come up for them.
Yeah. Thank you. Shauna.
Okay, so I know our kids are on electronics a lot lately. But, when you have little kids and they're just bouncing off the walls and you need a moment, your anxiety is super high, something just happened, and you need to find a way to lower it. Don't feel bad if you have to give them the iPad or the gaming system just for a little bit, because we know they get in the zone, right? When they're on the gaming system, they're in the zone and they're quiet usually. And so take that time to decompress, whatever that looks like for you, because it's trial and error again. We have to figure out what we like better. I've tried meditating. It's not really my thing, but yoga is, because I'm following something. And so I'm more in the moment. And it goes back to that mindfulness. Like Leslie was saying about the grounding techniques, some ideas are, with your senses, when you put something in your mouth that's pleasurable, like a mint or a candy or something, and you're just in that moment, really thinking about the sensations, or you go outside and you stick your feet in water or on the grass, the soil. Like I've heard amazing things about when you're gardening, the soil can actually increase endorphins. Essential oils, lavender is a great one. I keep one in my purse, and just every now and then, if I'm, feeling anxious, sniffing that can help. But if something's much bigger than that, and you just have so much on your plate, I mean, a lot of us do. I mean, this pandemic has rocked our world, and we're doing new things for the first time in our lives, and most of us are feeling the stress around the world. And being an empath, you really feel it. And so sometimes that does mean counseling, therapy. How much are you taking on that you just know you're at this point, the boiling water, it's tipping over? Professional help, for yourself too. Don't feel shameful if you need help. We all need help at some periods in our life. And I think that's a good model for your kids too, is saying, mommy needs help too, daddy needs help too sometimes. And I'm going to reach out and talk to somebody who is a professional, and this is what they've been studying for years. And so, please do that if you need to. I know Kaiser's tough. It's hard to get weekly sessions with Kaiser. I know they're better with groups. So sometimes, you might have to go outside and find a therapist. Some agencies have sliding scales, but I know it's costly, but nothing's more important than our health.
Thank you so much. And on one of the slides, we do have community resources as well. And I think we've mentioned this in past panels, which sometimes we don't need to wait to get counseling and go see a therapist when you're in crisis. It's a great preventative strategy. I mean, I love to go to therapy. I love it's like my time. I get to talk to somebody that's listening and just focusing on me. And that's okay as a parent. I mean, so often we're giving, and then we're like 16th on the priority list, right? Well, you're important too. And so you don't have to wait until you're in anxiety or you're in depression. If you're starting to feel, that's the time when you if you can access those resources, do it then. Because then once again, and I think you've all mentioned it, modeling for your child, this is something that we do when we need to take care of ourselves. And that's really important. And I think if we act like everything's fine all the time and we don't show them that sometimes we're struggling, then they think that mom and dad and guardian and aunt are just so happy all the time. Well, everybody feels crappy sometimes. It's totally normal. And I think we've heard that on and on again tonight, normalizing it and then accessing the resources and building those skills to put into our toolbox, because the skills that your child is going to learn from you and from us now are adult skills that are going to keep making them happy. So if we don't give them these strategies and tools, they're going to be 30, 40, 50 and still not know how to handle this. So we have an obligation and a responsibility as educators, as mental health providers, that we want to partner and work with you, with our community and our parents, because together we're going to really equip these kids to be able to be happy and successful people in our society. So I'm getting off my soapbox. I'm looking at the time. It's 6:16. I just wonder if there's any last minute thoughts or questions from the panel as we wrap up this evening. I just really want to thank everybody who hopped on live. I want to thank our panel of mental health professionals and our parent. I always am so impressed and in awe of the knowledge and the expertise that we have in our district. And I appreciate the time that you have given to our students and our parents and our community. So that's my thank you. Any last thoughts that anyone has? And just for the audience, in the chat, we look at the chat later and post and put questions that we might need to answer at a future date on the website. We do have a link for future questions or ideas for future topics. So this is a kind of, we're building this plane as we go. So if you have suggestions or thoughts, you can go onto the district website. You can email me, Stephanie Roberts, at the district. You can find my name on the district, but it's Roberts S at MDUSD. But we are creating these panels to support our students and our parents and our staff and families. And so we are trying to be responsive to the needs that are coming from you all. So please continue to give us suggestions and any thoughts from our panel. And we do have resources that are popping up right there that you'll see as well. All right, it looks like our panel is good. We see the chat, we see a lot of thank yous. We appreciate you taking this time with us for this evening. And once again, this will be recorded and put on the district website for you to watch at a later date, share with friends and families. And it's a resource that will be there and available to you. So thank you again for joining us live. And for those of us that are joining us on a replay, we're glad you came and learned with us tonight.